Welcome back to my series, The Bible Doesn't Make Any Sense. Today's episode, Acts chapter 1 verses 18 through 19 and Matthew chapter 27 verses 3 through 5. These two passages are telling the story of how Judas died, but they tell the story in two different ways. Matthew 27:5 says, "So Judas threw the money into the temple and left, and then he went away and hanged himself." They decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. This is why it has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then Acts 1:18 through 19 says, "With the payment he received for his wickedness, Judas bought a field. There he fell headlong, his body burst open, and all of his intestines spilled out. Everyone in Jerusalem heard about this, so they called it the Field of Blood." So a lot of differences in these two stories. So in one story, Judas throws the money back at the temple, goes to hang himself. Then the priests used that money that he threw back at them and bought land as a burial ground for foreigners. And that's why they called it a field of blood. And in the other story, he keeps the money, uses it to buy land, and falls or throws himself, and then his body bursts open and his intestines spill out. Everyone hears about it and decides to call it the Field of Blood. I've come across quite a few Christian websites that have said, well, there's no contradiction here, they were both right. Like he hung himself and then he fell and his body burst open. But even if that made sense, and it does not, the fact that he kept the money in one story and then gave it back in another story is too big of a contradiction. The story that I was told was the one from Matthew. He gave the money back and then hanged himself. So I hadn't even heard about the one in Acts until I started really studying the Bible. Discrepancies like this really point out the fact that the Bible is indeed man-made. Not to mention, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts were all books that were written decades after Jesus died. Jesus supposedly died in AD 33. Mark was written in 70 AD, Matthew and Luke in 80 AD, John in 95 AD, and Acts between 61 and 64 AD. So the most logical conclusion, in my opinion, would be they just forgot. Or they didn't get their story straight before they decided to start writing stuff, which again highlights the fact that all of this is man-made. We also have to remember what time period this is. During the time of Jesus, like 90% of people couldn't read or write. Almost all of the stories were communicated orally. Like I said, they probably forgot or they didn't get their story straight before they decided to start writing. Some Christian's gonna come up with some mythical answer for this, and I'm honestly excited to see it. The bull just keeps shitting at this point.